about time to begin our Bible class this evening. And we're studying Christians in the workplace. And tonight we're going to be studying one of the three foundational lessons that we have, which is our viewpoint, work unto God, not unto men. And I know that it's sometimes on Wednesday night everybody's tired and we have to pick ourselves up by the scruff of the neck and drag ourselves in here. And I just want you to know I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to your comments in class, and I hope it'll be beneficial. I know a lot of you are doing multiple things, that you're working, you may have finals. I know Austin's not here because he has a final this evening, so I know there's some people missing and you have a lot of pressure on you, so I appreciate you being here. Also, this is the first time I've been in front of the group here. I also would like to thank my wife. Anytime you teach a class, it's a family commitment, and Michelle has done a lot to take some things off of me so that I have time to study. She's one of those people where, you know, if you're not using it, it needs to be put up. It doesn't need to be left out. And I'm not. I'm not like that at all. If I'm using it, it's out, and it's out from start to finish. So, you know, from December to the end of January when this class is over, my stuff is out. So maybe say a little prayer for her, if you would, or me, maybe me as well. And I feel like I have to make a number of disclaimers up here first when we talk about a topic like this. One of the things that's not associated with the topic, but Michelle's like, you have got to let them know. You've got to let them know. During Thanksgiving, we came down with COVID in our family at our family gathering, and so that really knocked us for a loop. And I'm dealing with the lingering cough from that. So I've got my water, and if I need it, I'll bust into it. But if I have to walk outside, turn the microphone off, and cough my head off, just give me 60 seconds to do that. I would appreciate that. She said, if you don't tell them, they're going to think you're getting sick, and then there's going to be problems. I remember the days when you couldn't even clear your throat, you know, because you were afraid somebody was going to accuse you of spreading COVID. So I'm not up here, and Alex isn't up here because we're experts and we're perfect Christians in the workplace. We're definitely not. And I really struggle to a certain degree with certain things in the workplace that deal with spiritual issues. You know, trying to be an advocate for a client that you feel like is being mistreated, wrongfully treated, creates somewhat of a dilemma for me. And dealing with difficult customers, ones that you feel like are taking advantage of your business, struggle with that, and just trying to hold workers accountable, but you feel aren't doing the job that they need to do and that they fully understand what the job is. There are certain times when my business path crosses with my wife's business path, and so I have to be involved to a certain degree with that. And to hear people say things about my wife that I know aren't true, and they have very little experience and they don't know her, make it extra difficult for me sometimes. And so I feel like Paul, where you have to buffet your body daily, because that's the way I feel sometimes every day. I have to be very careful about how I respond to people. And one thing that I've found true is Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29, and I have found the same thing that the author of this book has found, and that is that God made man upright, but they have devised many schemes. And it's those schemes that frustrate me in the workforce and that I have to really struggle with. So I'll leave it at that. Again, the experience is in the room here. I'm just an experience. Alex is just an experience. But you are the experience in the room. And I was really pleased with Ian's comment on Sunday. I mean, it was just pure gold when he was talking about the situation with a worker in the workforce where there was definitely a difference of opinion, but they were trying to find some common ground so that they could communicate. And I hope that, to me, that's the application here, and that's the learning that's going to take place. There's definitely a scriptural component to it, but your experiences in the workplace and sharing those in this class are what's going to make the class a beneficial class. And so I want you to feel free to talk about those kind of things. Sanitize it if you need to. Don't make yourself look too bad if you need to. But successes and failures are important. I look back on my my work history, and there's plenty of room for opportunity, plenty of room for improvement. We did include, as has been stated, the young adults in this class because I felt like you have a unique perspective. Even if you're in some type of training or you're in school or you've just started a job, the process of getting that job was probably a lot different than the process when I got a job or older people got a job. And so the things that you encounter are important for us to hear. The challenges at school are important for us to hear. Those are the things that are going to really help us out in this class. Technology moves so fast. You know, we recently got a 3D printer for the shop, and I'm just amazed by it. You know, I'll sit there for 30 minutes just watching the printer, and it's like a cat with a laser pointer. And somebody will walk by and say, "Doug, keep moving, keep moving." And one of Austin's original quad members at school, he was focusing on trying to print food off of a printer. And so I was like, wow, I think I could get into that. You know, if Michelle asked me, do you need a lunch today? I'd just be like, no, I'll print something out. You know, so things change, but the social and cultural aspect of the work environment just recently has changed so much and so fast. And so it's really going to be important to hear again from the young folks on that, and as well as the older folks that have had experiences and can look back and share those with the group. Whenever Austin started filling out and I get to talk about Austin tonight because he's not here, and I'll try to do my best not to talk too much about Austin after this first class, but when we started looking at colleges and he started filling out his college applications, it was an eye-opening experience. I'm telling you, it was shocking, it was surprising, and it was really downright disturbing. And you folks that have young children, start praying now because it's only going to get worse. We had to have a dictionary to figure out where he fit in to the college based on the questions that they asked. And so I can only imagine what future employment applications are going to look like, what future census forms are going to look like, just the questions that they're going to ask, and just trying to figure out where you fit in. And probably the answer is you don't really fit in this world. Okay, so I do want to take an informal poll before we kind of get into the study. And Alex raised the bar on Sunday with the polling app, but I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. You know, one of my first jobs, it was a relatively new group, and there was a staff meeting called, and so we all went to the meeting room, and we all took our laptops in there. But there was an older guy in the group, and he came in with his yellow legal pad, you know, and he got a lot of chuckles. And now I'm that guy. I'm the guy with the legal pad. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this just raising hands. It's only 7 or 8 questions. Don't read too much into it. Just answer to the best that you can. And if you're like, oh, I shouldn't have raised my hand on that one, I should on this one, just vote twice. Just try to get it as close as we can here. This is just to help me in the future for future classes. Okay, so how many, just by show of hands, work primarily from home? And that means you're raising children or you have a home office and that's your primary work location. Okay. All right. How many work primarily from an external location? Did you? Yeah. We'll go with the retired. You can fit in where you want to on that. So if you try to make that fit, I appreciate that. How many are business owners? You own your own business. I like it. How many work mostly solo? In that, you're not on the phone a lot with somebody, you're not dealing with customers. Raise your hands again. Let me see that. Mostly solo. Okay. All right. That's good. Be honest. How many work mostly with others, whether it's Zoom or face-to-face? Okay. How many of you are supervisors of people? Wow. Impressive. All right. How many of you work under a supervisor? Yeah. Hopefully that's a very similar response. How many work with a Christian? And I'm not talking about they're in a big company and they work in the accounting department and you're over here in some other operational department and you kind of know they go to another church. How many people work closely with a fellow Christian? Okay, good. I'm gonna need your experiences at some point in time here. Okay. All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, in this first slide up here, this is a print that I have in my office, and it's been around for a while. But there are 3 foundational lessons that we have, and this is one of them. And this is our viewpoint, but it's really not our viewpoint, right? It's really the viewpoint that God wants us to have in relation to our work. Because if it becomes our viewpoint, then man devises many schemes, then that viewpoint may be somewhat skewed. As here, I have this, as I said, in one of our offices, and I use it as a conversation starter. And when I ask people, what is this? What do you take from this print? Most people will say, you have German Shepherds. And I don't have cartoon dogs either, but the point is that what you view as right is not necessarily what is actually right. That's not the true picture. So it's not just our viewpoint, it's the viewpoint that God wants us to have. All right, now I've got to figure out how to move on to the next slide. Okay, so there are goals to this study. There are 6 goals. One is to work for God's glory, and our life should be about that, so there should be no reason why our work life is not about that. To set Christ-like examples to those around us, to identify and overcome spiritual challenges, to create a forum for guidance from godly people. And I think that's one of the more important goals here in this forum, is to hear from other people's experience. Obviously, to seek guidance in Scripture and to make more godly decisions in the workplace. I like what Brian said on Sunday. There's kind of a 2-prong approach to a class like this. Is how do you protect yourself in one instance, but then how do you influence other people for good in another instance? And so another way to look at it. All right, this is, as I said, one of the 3 foundational lessons. The first one being our viewpoint of work, working to God, not into men. And then Alex will come in subsequent classes and talk about the other 2, God's viewpoint of work, that secular work is a spiritual work. And so that's kind of the premise that we're going to go with on some of the things that we talk about tonight, that our secular work is really a spiritual work. And then viewpoint of others, working as godly examples. So how far in the Bible do we have to go before we see references to work?
Scripture doesn't address employers and employees. It talks about masters and slaves. Say that again. It doesn't address an employer-employee relationship. It addresses masters and slaves.
Yeah, masters and bond servants. Bond servants may be the closest we can get to. There are some examples to vineyard owners and vineyard workers and things like that. But you're right. That's a primary example. Again, let me pose that question again. How far into the Bible do we have to go before we find references to work? Early Genesis and what?
Page 2.
Where did that come from?
Page 2.
Page 2. Page 2. Yeah, I mean, doesn't God in creation kind of set up this whole work-rest scenario here where he creates and then he rests? He kind of sets that example. But then we get to what's the kind of the next reference to work in Genesis? Cain and Abel. Yeah, Cain and Abel had specific jobs. What about their parents? Yeah, they had to tend the garden, right? That tending something requires some effort and some work. So we're going to go with the premise that work is an authorized activity, and I don't want to go any further on that because I'm going to step on Alex's toes there. But we need that presumption to move forward this evening. So, and I know it looks like and feels like I'm kind of jumping around, and I'm trying to get some footing for me for this class, but when it comes to relationships in the Bible, there are relationships in the Bible, and I'm just going to give you one so you can kind of be thinking about where I'm going with this. There's the husband-wife relationship. Okay, that's one relationship mentioned in the Bible. What are other relationships that we have in the Bible? Master-slave, Harrison, yeah, master-slave relationship. What else? Parent-child. Who said parent-child? Excellent, Albert, parent-child. And I'll stop there because those are 3 of the 4 that I have, and that's a good launching point here. Government citizen. There are probably a number of other relationships we could talk about. And so to prove the point here, I have the husband-wife, parent-child, slave-owner, and then from that, trying to extrapolate from the supervisor-worker or bond-servant type relationship. So let's just take each one of these relationships on their own. So let's look at the husband-wife relationship. So there's basically 4 scenarios that could happen here. We have the husband that's a non-Christian, the wife that's a non-Christian, the husband that's a Christian, wife's a non-Christian, the husband's a non-Christian, the wife's a Christian, or both the husband and wife are Christian. Which scenario up there is one that's geared most likely to demonstrate spiritual success? Say that again? When both of them are Christians, yeah, I mean, it's not a hard answer, that's right. When both of them are Christians. When both of them are Christians. All right, so we have this parent-child relationship. So very similar, and when we talk about a child here, I'm talking about a child that's past the age of accountability and has made a decision whether to reject the Lord or accept Him. So we have this parent non-Christian, child non-Christian, and then where the parent-child, one's a Christian, one's not. And then we have a situation where the parent's a Christian and the child's a Christian. Which one is more likely to have spiritual success in that group? Both. Both are Christian, exactly. Okay, so let's go to the master-slave relationship. Same situation here, 4 scenarios. Master-slave, non-Christian. Master's a Christian, slave's a non-Christian, master's a non-Christian, slave's a Christian. And then we're both the slave and the master are Christian. Which one is likely to have the most spiritual success? Yeah, the last one, where both are Christian. And so then let's try to extrapolate this to the master-worker, bond-servant, supervisor-worker relationship, however you want to refer to it. So we have this where the supervisor's a non-Christian, the worker's a non-Christian, the supervisor and the worker, either one's a Christian or non-Christian, and then where the supervisor's a Christian and the worker's a Christian. So what would be the best spiritual scenario there? Same thing, exactly. Not trying to pull one over on anybody, it's the same thing. So what's the purpose of going through an exercise like this? Looking at these relationships. Yeah, they're real. I mean, every one of those is real. There's no doubt. That's a good point. Good point. What else? I'm sorry? Common bond. Okay, and yeah, if in that last scenario, yeah, for sure, I have a common bond. Are you going into the perfect situation most of the time? When I asked the question about who works for a Christian, there were a few, which is nice. I mean, that's a good situation to be in. But likely, what scenario are people going into the workforce in? Yeah, either the second or third one, right? And so you're already going into not a perfect situation when you go into the workforce or you start a new job. That's the likely scenario. So what could turn, so, if you're in that situation where you're working for a Christian, you work close with a Christian, that's great. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, and I'm interested to hear what your feedback is on that. But what can turn not so good of a situation, the middle 2 scenarios, into a better situation? What can turn the not so good, because we've already come up with the presumption that the 2 scenarios in the middle are the likely scenario for most people. How can we make that a better situation? What's that? Make them a Christian, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the Great Commission, right? I mean, you have an opportunity to influence. That's one of the prongs that Brian had mentioned. You know, how do we influence others for good? I mean, that's if we don't go in with that's a possibility, then we're not going to make any progress in that area. So there's a way to definitely improve that situation. What's a way that you can make the situation even worse, though? Well, you not act like a Christian.
Well, I was saying being a Christian, that's part of the faith.
They're being pulled away. Yeah, I mean it's the first scenario when we're already in a situation where we're working around non-Christians, but we don't act like a Christian should, and we're pulled away. That we can make the situation worse. So I think it's good to have an understanding of, you know, we're not going into the best case scenario to begin with most of the time. If you can, that's great. Work with another Christian. One of my first jobs, not my first job was with Chuck E. Cheese, which makes me, you know, you don't realize how long companies have been around, you know, and I feel like, wow, Chuck E. Cheese, that's been so long ago. And I was the mouse. But I didn't keep that job, the mouse job long. I stayed with Chuck E. Cheese for a little bit, but somebody pulled my tail out when I was the mouse, you know, and they always said, protect the tail, you got to protect the tail, and they give you this 6-foot-long tail to hold on to, and there was a group of kids, and they were all around, and, you know, the mouse is not supposed to talk. It kind of ruins the effect of it, but there's always one kid in every group, and he yanked that tail plumb out of the back of that, and I grabbed him, and there was some debate on how hard I grabbed him, and so they moved me to the kitchen after that. But so a little on my first job. But the second job I had, I did work for a Christian. I was in high school, and I was going to college, and it was a member of the church, and he did carpentry work all the way up to general construction, and he was a solo kind of guy, great guy, Danny Haywood, and he would teach me how to do the job, leave me alone, and let me do it. And I didn't have to worry about language. I didn't have to worry about a bad influence. Those things were just off the table, and it was such a good job from that perspective, and I really enjoyed that. All right, so let me ask this question: does anybody have the perfect job? Patty has the perfect job. Are you saying yes, or she loves her job? I like that. I like it when people like their job. Is it the perfect job? There's no right or wrong answer, Patty. It's just, you know, is it the perfect job? Maybe it's the perfect job for you, and I'm glad you're in here. I don't know how you were able to get in here. I thought you were teaching a class, so that's really... You didn't have any what? Oh, wow. Well, welcome to the class. I appreciate it. I wish you were in here the entire time, because I think you have a unique perspective being a teacher. Okay, so, you know, you may feel like you have the perfect job. You know, the perfect job is if you don't like what you're doing, but the people are wonderful, it's probably not the best situation. And the opposite of that too, if you're working with delightful people, you know, it's not a right or wrong answer, but it's just a question to get you to think. So I talked a little bit about the secular job that I had around a Christian early on. There were a few people in here that raised their hand about working around and with other Christians. So tell me what that experience is like, those that have raised their hand. What was the experience like for those that raised their hand that said they worked around and directly with other Christians? Tell us what that experience is like.
It was like a shield. I was a teenager, and the gentleman that I worked with was the deacon at the church in a warehouse, and everybody around us was not a Christian. So it was helpful I felt safe place to work and felt that I could express things that I was struggling with other workers or with my job in particular, because he was, you know, we had a common bond. We shared Christianity together, went to the same church, and so that was helpful for me.
I like that. Yeah, and I appreciate that comment about the shield. When Austin went up to Ohio to do his internship this summer with Honda, there were some members of the church there, and Daniel was, you know, a great contact to help us get situated there. But there were people at that church that worked for Honda, and they were very protective of him. They would tell him, look, here's where you need to go in the company, here's where you need to stay away from in the company. If you go out on the line, just be aware this is what you're going to come in contact with. So it was very helpful from that perspective, so very similar to that. Who else has a comment on jobs where you work directly with a Christian, how that feels compared to other jobs?
So I teach at a Baptist school, and so it's a totally different environment than I'm sure most of you work in. So it's encouraging and uplifting. It's focused on God. We go to chapel every week. I get to hear lower school kids sing and worship every week. So it's really uplifting and encouraging.
So very, very similar values. You're around, spiritual people, and that there's something to be said, for that, for sure. For sure. Anybody else want to talk about their share experiences with us working with a Christian? Currently on one of and I have a few jobs that I've cabbaged together to make a living, and one of them I work with someone who was a Christian, who still has the principles of a Christian, and that's about as close as the experience I have right now with working with another Christian directly. And it holds me to a higher standard. I'm more focused on how I respond to people. This person treats my business like it's their business, which is one thing I appreciate. But I feel more accountable, and I do appreciate what you said about protection. That's what I felt like when I was working with Danny Haywood in carpentry and construction. But I feel like it does hold me to a higher standard, and I appreciate that aspect of it. Even though this person is not a Christian, they live by Christian principles to a large degree, and that helps me be more effective in being a Christian in the workplace as well, because we deal with sometimes not the greatest people and some frustrated people at times. Did Jesus have a job? What was Jesus' job? Carpenter. Yeah, he was a carpenter. Was that a noble profession back in Jesus' day? Was it a job that was well thought of? How was Jesus? Okay, taking away the fact that he's Jesus and his other job was a teacher at some point. How did people respond to him in relation to that job? How did they refer to him? We have one passage in Mark 6:3 where they reference this perception of him, and yeah, isn't this the carpenter? Yeah, I mean it's kind of a lowly job. They knew he was a carpenter, but what was the other job that he had later? As he got older. Teacher. Yeah, he was a teacher. Was he good at that job? Was he good at his carpenter job? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder if he had a special technique, or if there were things that once he became more well known, where people like, wow, Jesus made this, kind of like Lydia with the different things, and so I don't know, but I know that was. It seems to be that was a lowly job, and it didn't garner much praise from that. But in the same passage regarding his teaching, it said in Mark 6:2, many hearing him were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him that such mighty works are performed by his hand? So, which job was the most important of the jobs that he had? Teaching, obviously. And maybe we can take something from that maybe our secular jobs aren't as important as maybe what we do on those jobs and how we interact with other people and using those as opportunities to do good and influence them to reflect Christ's image. Okay, so I want to stop here for a minute. I'm going to scroll through a bunch of slides because I want to get to this last one, and we'll come back to these slides. Okay, So I sent out a question the best way I knew how over the Telegram system, and I know that doesn't go to everybody, but I was trying to get as much center mass as I possibly could. And I asked that if you got that on Telegram to share that with your families and talk about what is the best piece of advice that you could give a brother or sister in Christ to help them be a successful Christian at work. And that's not just younger people coming into the workforce. That may be that you have an opportunity to start over in a new job or change positions within an organization. So what is the best piece of advice that you could give a brother or sister in Christ to help them be a successful Christian at work? Brian?
Practice your faith.
Okay.
Be holy. People will learn from your behavior. I mean, I wasn't a drinker, and people understood I wasn't drinking when we went to dinner. You know, it was just understood that you weren't going to engage in various activities that they were. And people took notice just by your behavior, as opposed to getting your Bible out and standing on a chair and start sidewalk preaching.
Preaching, yeah. Good. I like that. I like that. That's a good piece of advice. What else?
Somebody that turned out to be a fellow Christian, but I didn't know it for a long time. And then after I found it out, I got to thinking, oh man, I hope I haven't misbehaved in some way that would be look bad on me. So it wasn't somebody I worked with day to day, but a lot of different options.
Yeah, being consistent. Years ago, there was a fellow that he would have been a peer of mine, I guess, so to speak. And he was a Christian. He went to a Church of Christ a good ways away, and we worked for a period of months together, not knowing that we were Christians. And then one day he pulled me aside and he said, "Where do you go to church?" And I told him, he's like, "Thought so," you know. And I said, "Why do you say?" And I had the same, inclination with him that there's something different about this person. We're in agreement with a lot of things, which was unusual. So appreciate that comment.
Yeah,
Alex?
to add to that, that's what I was kind of just thinking in my head. It's like, don't hide that you're a Christian. Tell people that you are. And, once you have that out, you're almost elevating your own standard of yourself around people because people know that you're a Christian.
I like it. Yeah, for sure. What else?
I'll add one other thing that I've become better at in my later years, but you can introduce God and Christianity into your conversation, if you will. I was just talking to one lady who helped me, and I said, I believe in the providence of God, and you helped me, and that was providential, and I thank you, and I hope you have a blessed day. And she just opened up, and we had a bit of a conversation right there. And you could do things like that, not to be over the top, preaching book, chapter, and verse, but just adding comments like that.
Yeah, I like that. You can definitely take control of the narrative and the conversation and send the message that you're a spiritual person. And I think that definitely helps out in the workplace.
Doug, I was just thinking, there are certain professions and things we choose to do that would lend itself easier to being a Christian. There are certain jobs that it would be very difficult to be a Christian in. And so, thinking about, people going through school and whatnot, make sure you choose a profession that is going to be conducive to that and not a hindrance to that.
Yeah, I think that's a lot to be said for that. I will say, in one of the jobs I do, there are just certain things, certain cases I cannot take as a Christian. And family issues are one of those, family law issues are one of those things where, I avoid that, I don't do it because that you can get deep into a bad situation really quick for a Christian. And so, doing some type of survey to determine where, what some of these jobs focus on, I think is a good thing. Point well taken. Yes, sir, Andrew.
Or people that society thought were good people. He intentionally spent time with people who needed Jesus the most. And there's a sense in which we can do the same thing. Like, it's a wonderful opportunity that we have workplaces with people who need Jesus. And that's so exciting that we get to spend time with people who are totally different from us.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, because the relationship there is he's the physician, and he's not out to heal the people that are well. He's out to heal the people that are not well. And so that's kind of the mentality we have to go into the workforce with when we're not going into the best situation. Maybe it is the best situation for a Christian to go into. I will say that it's a great situation to be in when you're working with fellow Christians, because you probably still have the opportunity, even them, to interact with people that aren't, in your work. But it's nice to have that accountability piece in working with a Christian. But you're absolutely right, Andrew. That's a great comment. Anybody else have any advice? I've got two that I need to read that were sent to me that I think are good as well, and then I'll share mine with you, which is not much different than anybody else's here. So this was advice given in this. I didn't have permission to use somebody's name, so this is just anonymous. This was advice given in my early sales days from an older mentor. I was concerned about having to entertain customers, and as was the norm. I was not interested in the bars and the clubs and being away from my family. This mentor told me the customers will know what they can request of me as long as I establish myself early on and hold my ground and remain consistent. They will know who they can ask for fishing trips, ball games, dinners, clubs, etc. I just had to politely say no and offer another alternative, and they would get it. Decide now and stay consistent. And that's kind of what we're hearing consistently through the pieces of advice that we've talked about. So a good piece of advice there. This is a one that has a little bit different perspective on it. It says, don't go in with a combative and isolationist stance with predetermined opinions that it will be a battle. And I think that's probably a good piece of advice to have. People aren't automatically against you. Don't go in with that attitude. Seek out good people with like minds and good hearts. They're out there. Also, don't assume your Christian beliefs are completely antithetical to those of all your coworkers. Christians historically have acted cowardly and ashamed of their faith, which has done us great harm. Be proud of your life's purpose as a Christian and steadfast in your morals. And I thought that was a good write-up, because I think maybe sometimes we go in and we're too defensive, and then we shut down the lines of communication with people. The piece of advice that I have is not different than what we're hearing here, but it's let people know early on that you're a Christian. That's the advice that I would give young people. That's the advice I give my son, is early on let people know that you're a Christian. And that doesn't mean that you have to stand on a chair and wave your Bible, but you can, as I said, you can navigate conversations where you're dropping points and words and ideas that lend to you being a Christian. And I think that will help versus trying to lay low, trying to fit in, and then you're going with the flow, and then all of a sudden you have to make a big change so that people understand that these aren't things that you do. And so I think early on, trying to do your best to let people know that you're a spiritual person is extremely important. Yes, sir.
I know this is directed towards Christians in the workplace, but I just can't help but be thinking about our college students. The data shows that people are leaving the faith, and the number of faithful is declining. The number of Christians are declining in this nation. And a big reason why that is happening is you got children who are raised in the church go off to college and they fall away. In their first exposure, they get caught up with their peers and with the teachers, and it's a huge problem. And so I think whatever we're discussing here now applies even more so in for our young people who go off to college.
Yeah, absolutely. That going off to college is a tough thing. I have my own perspective of that, and And it's you're either going to be stronger or you're going to be weaker. There's kind of this no in between. And maybe I'm wrong on that, and it probably could be. But I know when I went off to college, it was difficult. And it was one of those things, you either sink or you swim. You know, I was there by myself. It was not the best environment. I was in the sports area, and, you know, there were no examples, you know, to help support me around there except the local church. And they were very supportive of me, and they helped me be better than I would have been had I not had a good support system there. But you're right. We lose a lot of people when they go off. They're caught in that flow because they haven't made that stance that, you know, they're a Christian and made that decision that they're going to live as a Christian when they're off at school. So, point well taken. Point well taken. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the biblical aspects of working unto God, not unto men, and we'll look at some of these scriptures here. There's only really two of them. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. It says, "Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart as to Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will, doing service as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. And you, masters, do the same things to them, giving up threatening, knowing that your own master also is in heaven, and there's no partiality with him." So the question is, what do we have to recognize if we are consistently going to have a godly attitude in the workplace based on that passage? Mike?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is kind of the same thing that Jesus said to, wasn't it to Pilate, you know, that God gave him his authority. And if I'm a worker and someone's above me, I need to obey them because God has given them authority, you know, that authority. So I see that in that passage for sure, where it says, "Bondservants, be obedient to your masters."
Yeah, exactly. We've got to be obedient to authority. I mean, that's kind of one of the foundational principles there, is that we've got to be obedient to those that are in authority. Just posing this question, what kind of relationship would result if masters and slaves behaved like God wanted them to behave? You can run from the worst slave master type situation that you know this country's experienced all the way to the bondservant. So if both the master and the slave behaved like God wanted them to, what kind of relationship would that be? Almost a friendship. And I don't want to belittle the slavery issue in this country, but if both parties behaved like God wanted them to, it would be a much better relationship, right? I mean, it's not that the slave wouldn't have to work hard, and that it would be hard, and that they wouldn't necessarily they may not be compensated at all. But the way that they treated each other would be a lot different, at least according to this passage in Ephesians. Okay, so was that bell the first bell? Second, okay. All right, so we'll stick a fork in it here. I'm quite sure that if we had a multiple choice question on the passages, that everybody would make 100 on that. So I appreciate your comments, appreciate your time, and Alex will take back over on Sunday with the first foundational lesson. How's that?